simply not true, okay? Get the lies out of the books. The Bible says God created all things, and it says, heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. Hath not my hand made all these things? God made everything. And the Bible says God formed the entire world. The Bible says God created great whales and every living thing. Now, the textbooks in school are going to teach your kids that every living thing happened by itself. They're not going to teach them God created every living thing, that's for sure. Here's a textbook that says, the history of life on earth began about 3.5 billion years ago. How this occurred has been and will continue to be a topic for inquiry. Let me give you the Hovind translation of what they just said. What they just said is, it's okay to inquire how it evolved. It is not okay to inquire if it evolved. Hey kids, you're allowed to research, how did evolution happen? And if some kid says, well, maybe it didn't happen at all. Oh, shut up, kid, you're out of my class, okay? The only way you can research is, how did it happen? You cannot even ask the question, did it happen? That's not education. That's indoctrination. Okay? I'm sick and tired of paying for that stuff. Now, nobody knows how a mixture of lifeless chemicals spontaneously organize themselves into the first living cell. Paul Davies said, nobody has a clue how life got started from non-living material by itself. There is not even a good theory how it can happen, but the textbooks are going to teach your kids it just happened, okay? They just tell them, hey, it happened. And you can't even consider the option that maybe God made it. Here's what happened. Back in the 50s, two guys, Miller and Urey, decided to figure out how life evolved. So they took a mixture of chemicals and ran it through these tubes and tried to create life in the laboratory. The experiment's been duplicated many, many times, always been a failure, and always created more problems for the evolutionist. This textbook says, although he never proved how life originated, he did add evidence to the theory that life could have started by itself. That is a lie. All they did was create problems for the idea that life could have started by itself. This one says, swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. Oh, it sure is. It don't even happen. That's how slow it is. There are several different articles that say life came from clay. Yep, got some clay together and poof, came alive on the bottom of the ocean. They did not address the origin of life in Darwin's book, and it's never been figured out since how life could have started. What he did is he took these 4 chemicals and put them in these glass tubes, made them circulate around, and tried to create life in the laboratory. This textbook says, many important events occurred during the Archean era, the most important of which was the evolution of life. Progress from complex molecules to the simplest living organism was a very long process. I guess so. If you give it billions of years, somehow it looks more reasonable, This one says, the first living cells emerged between 4 billion and 3.8 billion years ago. There is no record of the event. But you better believe it, and you're going to be tested on it. The first self-replicating systems must have emerged in this organic soup. So great-great-great-great-grandpa was soup. This is one of the lies in the textbooks you kids have to face. Nobody has a clue how life could have gotten started by non-living chemicals. Even Haeckel confessed, he's the guy we talked about in the last session, that made up the idea that the embryo has gill slits, so they could justify abortion. Haeckel said, he claimed that spontaneous generation must be true, not because it had been proven in the laboratory, but because otherwise it would be necessary to believe in a creator. Well, Ernst, I'm sorry, bud, that's just the way it goes. Okay, there's a creator, whether you like it or not, okay? So have they really produced life in the laboratory? Oh, they haven't even come close. Here's what they did. They took 4 gases. They took methane, ammonia, water vapor, and hydrogen, ran them through these tubes, ran it through a spark chamber supposed to simulate lightning. And say, we're going to put them together and make life in the laboratory. At the bottom of the flask, they got this red goo, and they kept draining the goo off, because if it went through the spark again, it would destroy it. So they had to make the goo and then save it from the next spark, okay? They said in the textbook here it was rich in amino acids, this red goo was. Well, that's simply a lie, okay? They didn't come close to making life. The problem is they had a reducing atmosphere. In other words, he excluded oxygen. You can look at his 4 gases. There's no oxygen there. He knew if he had oxygen in there, it would oxidize whatever chemicals tried to combine. You cut a banana open and lay it on the table, it turns brown, it oxidizes. You don't paint your car, and it oxidizes, it rusts. Well, living cells will oxidize quickly in the presence of oxygen. So he didn't put any oxygen in there. That creates a serious problem, because if you have oxygen, you cannot get life to come from non-living chemicals. The problem is ozone is made from oxygen, and ozone blocks UV light, and UV light destroys ammonia, and ammonia is one of the 4 gases he's got. So you cannot get life to evolve with oxygen, and you cannot get life to evolve without oxygen. Because if you don't have oxygen, you don't have ozone, and now your ammonia gets destroyed. It's just not going to work either way. And the Earth has always had oxygen, even more than today. This guy said, what evidence is there for a primitive methane ammonia atmosphere on Earth? The answer is there is no evidence for it, but much against it. We find in general no evidence in the sedimentary distribution of carbon, sulfur, uranium, etc., of an oxygen-free atmosphere ever existed on the Earth. If somebody tells you the early Earth had a reducing atmosphere, you tell them Kent Hovind said they're confused or they're deliberately lying, because it's not true. The Earth has always had oxygen. This article said, it's suggested from the earliest dated rocks at 3.7 billion years ago, Earth had an oxygenic atmosphere. They've always known the Earth had oxygen, even more than we have today. We covered that on seminar part 2, how the early Earth probably had even more oxygen, made them live longer. This textbook says, there was no oxygen on the Earth, which is a lie, and then it says the rocks absorbed it. Hello? How can they absorb it if it wasn't there? Well, think about it. Second problem they had with the Miller experiment, they filtered out the product. That is not realistic for nature, okay? They saved the goo from getting sparked the second time because it would have destroyed it. What he actually made in this experiment was 85% tar, 13% carboxylic acid. Now, both of those are poisonous to life. If you make a mixture that's 98% poisonous to the other 2%, I don't think it's logical to say you've succeeded in creating anything that's going to help make life, okay? The problems are he made mostly only 2 amino acids. There are 20 different ones required to make life. 20 different amino acids. Now, these amino acids are kind of like letters of the alphabet, okay? You have to have 26 letters in the English alphabet to make all the words that we have. Well, you have to have 20 different amino acids to make all the proteins that your body has. With those 20 different amino acids, your body can build a bazillion different kinds of proteins, kind of like you can make a lot of different words with the same 26 letters, okay? What he actually made was a couple of letters, like 2 of the letters of the alphabet, by combining these gases. This creates a real problem since half of them were left-handed and half of them were right-handed. What he actually made was amino acids, only 2 of them, and half of them were backwards. I mean, if I drop letters of the alphabet, there's a 50-50 chance some of them are going to land upside down. They don't do any good. You have to have them all facing the right way. The smallest proteins we know of have about 70 to 100 amino acids, all of them facing the right way. This greatly compounds the problem, okay? DNA and RNA are all right-handed. All other proteins are left-handed. It's a very puzzling fact. All proteins that have been investigated from animals, plants, and higher organisms, and from simple organisms, bacteria, molds, even viruses, are made of left-handed amino acids. They're all that way. So he's really got a problem since half of his letters were backwards. And there are hundreds of amino acids required to combine in just the right way to make a protein, and they unbond in water faster than they bond. And they claim this all happened in the oceans. Well, the oceans are completely full of water, all the way to the bottom. And Brownian motion is going to drive them apart. It's not going to put them together. One of the lies in the textbooks is that they made life in the laboratory. They have all they've done. Every experiment has made the problem worse for the evolutionist, okay? These spontaneous generations do not occur spontaneously in water. Life is not going to get started in this way. There's a whole lot more in the book, Icons of Evolution, if you want a lot more on the subject to go down deep. But they got this weird idea in their head that all they have to do is get all the right chemicals together and then add energy, and it'll make life. Okay, well, let's do an experiment. Let's put a frog in a blender and turn it on. In a matter of moments, you will have frog nog. And you will have all of the chemicals required to make a frog in one blender, right? Then we're going to add energy. You can turn it on puree for 30 minutes. You can nuke it, microwave it, zap it with jumper cables. I don't care what you do. Drop a hand grenade in there. Add all the energy you want, okay? How long will it take to reassemble the frog? It'll never happen. See, just getting the chemicals together isn't the problem. You go to the mortuary, you got a dead body laying there, you got all the chemicals required for life right there in one spot. Bring it back to life. Life is something different. I don't think science has ever defined that clearly, but they talk about how we all came from this early life form. Once this first life form got started, this single cell, then it evolved into everything else. Like this textbook shows the kids that a bacteria slowly evolved to a human. These trees of life are absolute propaganda. There is no evidence for any of these, okay? Even Mary Leakey said, those trees of life with the branches of our ancestors, that's a lot of nonsense, okay? Stephen Gould said the evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks are not the evidence of fossils, that's for sure. There is no evidence that any animal is related to any other kind of animal. But this textbook says, all the many forms of life on Earth today are descended from a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. There's no such thing as a primitive unicellular organism. If it's alive, it's complicated. We'll cover more on that in a minute. And then it says, no traces of those events remain. What they do is they tell the kids, okay kids, the mammals, the birds, and the crocodiles have a common ancestor. They draw these trees in the books, and they look so pretty, and the kid goes, wow, they've got proof. I saw it in my book. No, they've got a picture in your book, okay? Everything inside that circle is pure religious speculation. They think it happened, they hope it happened, but there is zero evidence for anything inside that circle. It's one of the lies you're going to have to face in your textbook. The Bible says if you offend one of these little ones, you'd be better off with a millstone about your neck. Go swimming. These folks teaching evolution are in serious trouble when they stand before God. Then they tell them we come from a simple, primitive, unicellular organism. Look, just because it's smaller doesn't mean it's simpler. A paramecium is more complicated than a space shuttle, and you can put thousands of those into one drop of water. Smaller is not simpler. That's one of the lies in the textbooks. I'll show you. Here's a microchip inside a paperclip. Pretty small. Not simple. This microchip is being held in the mouth of an ant, and that little microchip can process every letter of the Bible 200 times per second. Smaller is not simpler. I'll show you. Let's compare the brain of a honeybee to NASA's Cray computer. At one time, the world's fastest computer, I think they got a faster one now. The brain of a honeybee is pretty small. The Cray computer is huge. We would all agree there's a size difference, right? Okay. Now, the Cray computer could do 6 billion calculations per second. It was estimated that the honeybee's brain is doing about 1 trillion calculations per second, 1,000 billion. So that little honeybee brain is about 133 times faster than a Cray computer. The Cray uses many megawatts. It's power hungry. The honeybee uses 10 microwatts. Did you know honeybees not only make honey, they fly on honey. That's their energy source. And a honeybee can fly 1,000,000 miles on 1 gallon of honey. How would you like a machine that gets 1,000,000 miles per gallon? Especially at today's price of gas, right? Fill up once and you're done for the rest of your life. The Cray cost $48 million. The honeybee's brain is pretty cheap. You splat them on your windshield all the time, right? Many people scramble when the Cray breaks down. Nobody heals the honeybee. A self-healing computer. Steve, you work on computers. How'd you like one of them? Something crashes, reconfigures itself, fixes it all up, no problem. Cray weighed 2,300 pounds. Honeybee's brain doesn't weigh too much. So what should we conclude? Let's see, the supercomputer is huge, it is slow, it is very inefficient, it is power hungry, and it had to be designed. We all know that, right? But did they turn around and look at the honeybee and say, well, that happened by chance? And the brain of a human's a whole lot more complex than a honeybee. For heaven's sake. Your brain can hold more information than the entire British Library. The human brain is phenomenal, okay? You have more computational power in bits per second than the entire national telephone system. One brain surgeon estimated that there are more connections in just one person's brain, there are more connections than the entire electrical system of the United States. How many wires have been connected together in the United States, would you guess, inside every computer and inside every machine and inside every building? Like zillions of them. One brain has more than that. One professor told me that he believed in evolution, and I said, well, sir, do you believe your brain is nothing but 3 pounds of chemicals that got together by chance? He said, yeah.